He stood frozen in the doorway, his hand gripping the frame for support. His daughter, the little girl who hadn't eaten in 2 weeks, was chewing. Nathaniel Kingston covered his mouth as tears streamed down his face. All he could think was, how? Nathaniel Kingston lost his wife Victoria 8 months ago. A sudden aneurysm. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. Their 3-year-old daughter Elena didn't understand death. She only knew mommy wasn't coming back. And something inside her shattered. Elena stopped talking first. Then playing. Then smiling. And 2 weeks ago, she stopped eating entirely. Nathaniel hired everyone. Dr. Marcus Lee, the country's top pediatric psychologist. Dr. Sarah Williams, a renowned child nutrition specialist. Amanda Rodriguez, a feeding therapist who'd helped hundreds of children. None of them could reach her. Elena just sat there, growing thinner each day, staring at nothing with hollow eyes. Her father would sit with her for hours, begging, pleading, promising her the world. She wouldn't even look at him. Margaret Hayes, Nathaniel's longtime estate manager, cried every time she saw the little girl fading away. Nathaniel was a billionaire who could buy anything on earth, but he couldn't save his daughter. Then one morning, a new maid arrived. Her name was Talia Sinclair. 28 years old, she came from a neighborhood where people struggled to make ends meet. When Margaret told her about Elena, Talia didn't look shocked. She looked understanding. Because when Talia was 6, her mother died too. And she remembered what it felt like to not want to live anymore. That afternoon, Talia went upstairs to Elena's room. She didn't force her to eat. She just sat with her and told Elena about her own mother, about grief, about missing someone so much it physically hurts. Elena's eyes flickered. Just for a second. The next morning, Talia made something simple. Chocolate chip pancakes, nothing fancy. She sat down next to Elena and started eating them herself, telling stories about Sunday mornings with her mother. Elena watched. And then, for the first time in 2 weeks, she reached out her hand. Nathaniel was in his study when Margaret burst in, barely able to speak. "She's eating." Nathaniel didn't believe it. He ran up the stairs and froze in the doorway. There was his daughter, holding a piece of pancake, chewing slowly, tears streaming down her face. And sitting beside her was a woman he barely knew. Before we reveal how this moment became possible, make sure you subscribe to this channel, Now's Haven, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because if you've ever felt helpless watching someone you love fade away, you need to see what happens next. Sometimes God sends help from the last place you'd expect. But let me take you back to the beginning. To the morning when everything started to change. Dr. Marcus Lee had been the first specialist through the door. Harvard-trained, 20 years of experience, author of 3 books on childhood trauma. He spent 2 hours with Elena, using every technique in his arsenal. When he came downstairs, his face was gray. "Mr. Kingston, I've never seen anything like this," he said, setting his leather briefcase on the marble counter. "She's not responding to any traditional approaches. It's as if she's chosen to disconnect completely. But she'll eat eventually, right?" Nathaniel's voice had cracked. Survival instinct kicks in? Dr. Lee's silence was answer enough. Dr. Sarah Williams came next. She brought charts, meal plans, nutritional supplements. She tried everything: favorite foods, comfort foods, foods presented as games. Elena wouldn't touch any of it. "I'm concerned about organ damage if this continues," Dr. Williams told him on day 10. "We may need to consider hospitalization." Feeding tubes. Nathaniel had pressed his palms against his eyes. "She's 3 years old." Amanda Rodriguez, the feeding therapist, lasted 3 days. She was a warm woman with kind eyes who'd helped hundreds of children overcome eating disorders and trauma-related food refusal. But on the 3rd day, she found Nathaniel in the kitchen, her expression defeated. Mr. Kingston, I think Elena's refusal to eat isn't about food at all, she said gently. It's about something deeper. Something I don't have the tools to reach. After she left, Nathaniel stood at Elena's door watching his daughter sit motionless on the floor, staring at a photograph of Victoria. Elena's cheeks were hollow. Her arms looked like twigs. He could count her ribs through her nightgown. Please, sweetheart, he whispered. Please eat something. Anything. She didn't even blink. Margaret found him that night, sitting alone in the dark kitchen at 2 a.m., his head in his hands. Sir, you need to rest. I'm losing her, Margaret. His voice broke. I lost Victoria, and now I'm losing Elena, and I don't know how to stop it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. We'll find a way. But as the days passed and Elena grew weaker, that promise felt increasingly empty. Then, on the 14th day, Margaret mentioned she'd hired someone new. A young woman named Talia Sinclair to help with housekeeping. Nathaniel barely registered the information. What did it matter who cleaned the house when his daughter was dying upstairs? Talia arrived early the next morning. Nathaniel was in his study, staring at his computer screen without seeing it, when Margaret brought her in. Mr. Kingston, this is Talia Sinclair. Nathaniel looked up. The young woman standing before him was slender, with intelligent dark eyes and an air of quiet strength. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a modest blouse, and carried herself with dignity despite the clear difference in their circumstances. Welcome, he managed, though the word felt hollow. What did welcomes matter anymore? Margaret pulled Talia aside, and Nathaniel heard fragments of their conversation. The girl upstairs hasn't eaten in 2 weeks. Specialists can't help, she's fading. He expected to see shock on Talia's face. The same uncomfortable pity he'd seen on everyone else's faces. Instead, when Talia turned back toward him, her expression was something else entirely. Understanding. Mr. Kingston, she said softly. If it's all right with you, I'd like to meet Elena. Something in her voice made him pause. Not presumption. Not false confidence. Just knowing. The doctors, he started. I'm not a doctor, Talia interrupted gently. But I lost my mother when I was 6 years old. And for a while after, I didn't want to eat either. The room went quiet. You can try, Nathaniel finally said, though hope had abandoned him weeks ago. That afternoon, Talia climbed the stairs to Elena's room. Through the crack in his study door, Nathaniel watched her knock softly, heard her gentle voice introducing herself. He heard the door close. For 30 minutes, nothing. Then he heard something he hadn't heard in months. Elena's voice. Barely audible, but speaking. His heart stopped. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He paced the halls, passing Elena's door repeatedly. Around 4 a.m., he finally collapsed in his own bed, exhausted but unable to stop thinking about the quiet conversation he'd overheard. Talia's soft words about loss. Elena's whispered responses. The next morning, Nathaniel woke to sounds in the kitchen. When he went downstairs, he found Talia at the stove, making chocolate chip pancakes. Those aren't on her meal plan, he said automatically. Talia turned, meeting his eyes steadily. With respect, sir, she's not eating what's on the meal plan. Before he could respond, she plated the pancakes and headed upstairs. Nathaniel returned to his study, trying to focus on work, trying not to hope, trying not to imagine another failed attempt, another day of watching his daughter disappear. Then Margaret burst through the door, her face transformed. Tears streaming. Unable to form words. Margaret gasped. Sir, she's eating. Nathaniel's world tilted. What? Elena. She's eating. He ran. Took the stairs 2 at a time. Raced down the hallway. And stopped in the doorway, his hand gripping the frame, his breath caught in his throat. There was Elena, sitting on her bed. In her small hand she held a piece of pancake. Her mouth moved, chewing, swallowing. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And beside her sat Talia, one hand on Elena's back, whispering words he couldn't hear. Nathaniel covered his mouth as his own tears came. After 2 weeks of silence, after countless specialists, after losing all hope, his daughter was eating. How? He whispered to no one. But deep down, watching the young woman who'd arrived just yesterday sit beside his daughter like she'd been there all along, Nathaniel thought he was beginning to understand. Sometimes God sends help from the last place you'd expect. But to understand how we got to that moment, to Elena eating, to Nathaniel's tears of relief, to the impossible becoming possible, we need to go back 24 hours. Talia's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. She dressed quickly in the dark of her studio apartment in South Brooklyn, pulling on the simple black pants and white blouse she'd bought specifically for this job. Through her window, the pre-dawn streets were still empty, street lights casting yellow pools on cracked sidewalks. She caught the first bus at 5:15. Watched the city transform through the foggy windows as they crossed from her neighborhood into Manhattan. The buildings grew taller. The streets grew cleaner. The cars grew more expensive. By the time she transferred to the second bus heading up the Upper East Side, dawn was just beginning to break over the East River. The Kingston mansion stood on a tree-lined street facing Central Park. 5 stories of pale limestone, with wrought iron balconies and windows that probably cost more than Talia's entire year's rent. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, taking it in. Somewhere inside that beautiful building, a little girl was dying. Talia checked her watch, 6:47 a.m., and walked around to the service entrance at the back. Margaret Hayes answered on the first knock. She was a woman in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that had seen too much sorrow lately. "You must be Talia," Margaret said, her voice warm but tired. "Come in." The kitchen was massive. Everything gleamed, stainless steel appliances, white marble countertops, custom cabinets that stretched to the high ceilings. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park spread out like a painting, the morning light turning the trees gold and amber. Margaret handed Talia an apron without ceremony. "I'll show you around later. Right now, we need to prepare breakfast." She paused, her hands stilling on the counter. "For the girl." Talia tied the apron around her waist. "What's her name?" "Elena." Margaret's voice softened when she said it. "She's 3 years old." "What is she like?" Margaret turned away, busying herself with pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "It doesn't matter anymore what she likes. She doesn't eat." Talia washed her hands at the sink, the water running in the oppressive silence. No music playing. No television in the background. No voices. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when grief moves into a house and makes itself at home. "How long has she," Talia started. 2 weeks since she stopped eating completely." Margaret set organic eggs, gluten-free bread, and fresh berries on the counter. "But she's been disappearing for months. Ever since her mother died." Talia's hands stilled under the water. "I'm so sorry." Margaret's shoulders tensed. "Start with the eggs. Scrambled, no salt. Toast cut into triangles. Berries washed and dried." She pulled out a small tray, the kind you'd use to serve someone breakfast in bed. "Everything has to be perfect. Not that it matters." Talia dried her hands and got to work. She cracked the eggs into a bowl, whisked them gently. The knife made soft sounds against the cutting board as she sliced strawberries. Outside the windows, the city was waking up, but inside the kitchen, time felt suspended. Margaret returned with a delicate china plate painted with tiny flowers. She arranged everything with the care of someone preparing something sacred. "The eggs just so." the toast points arranged like petals, the berries scattered artfully. Does she ever ask for anything? Talia asked quietly. Margaret shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she placed a small glass of orange juice on the tray. She doesn't talk anymore. Not since her mother died. She picked up the tray. I'll be right back. Talia watched her climb the back stairs, the tray balanced carefully in both hands. Then she turned to the windows, staring out at Central Park without really seeing it. She knew that kind of silence Margaret had described. The kind that swallows you whole. The kind where you're still breathing but not really living. She'd been 7 when her own mother died. Had stopped eating too, for different reasons but the same grief. Her grandmother had sat with her every single day, not forcing, just present. Just there. 15 minutes later, Margaret came back down. The tray was untouched. Every item exactly as it had been arranged. Margaret set it on the counter without a word, then walked to the sink and stood there, staring out the window. Her shoulders shook once, then went still. Talia dried her hands on a towel. How long has this been going on? 2 weeks since she stopped eating completely. Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. But she's been disappearing for months. Just sitting in her room, staring at photographs of her mother. Does her father go to her? Every few hours. He talks to her, reads to her, begs her. Margaret scraped the cold eggs into the trash. She doesn't respond. It's like she's already gone. Talia's chest tightened. She understood that feeling. The one where you're just waiting. Waiting for the pain to stop or waiting to stop feeling anything at all. Footsteps sounded from upstairs. Slow, heavy, like someone carrying weight no one else could see. That's Mr. Kingston, Margaret whispered. He's been working from home since this started. Doesn't leave her side for long. A few minutes later, he appeared in the doorway. Nathaniel Kingston was exactly what Talia expected. Tall, well-dressed even at 7 in the morning, salt and pepper hair that probably looked distinguished in business meetings. But his face told a different story. Hollow eyes. The shadow of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Hands that shook slightly as he poured himself coffee. He didn't look at Talia at first. Just stood by the window, staring out at nothing. "Good morning, sir," Talia said gently. He glanced over like he'd forgotten anyone else was there. "You're the new hire." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." Talia Sinclair. He nodded once, then turned back to the window. The coffee sat untouched in his hand. "How long do you think you'll last?" The words weren't meant to be cruel. They were just tired. Defeated. "Sir, most people quit after 3 days. They can't handle it. Watching a child disappear." He took a sip of coffee, his hand trembling. "Can't say I blame them." Talia met his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." For a second, something flickered across his face. Not hope. Hope had probably left this house weeks ago. Just surprise. Like he couldn't quite believe someone would choose to stay in this darkness. He set down his cup and walked out without another word. Margaret let out a long breath. "He's a good man," she said quietly, "but he doesn't know how to fight something he can't control." Around 10, Margaret brought down another tray. Still untouched. The eggs were cold and congealed. The toast had dried at the edges. The orange juice sat in the glass like it had given up. Margaret scraped it all into the trash without comment. Talia watched her, thinking about Elena upstairs. About a little girl who'd stopped eating because the world had stopped making sense. About grief so deep a 3-year-old couldn't find her way out of it. She thought about her own mother. About being 7 and not understanding why God would take someone you loved. "What does she do all day?" Talia asked. "Sits in her room. Stares at the walls. Sometimes looks at pictures of her mother." Margaret's voice cracked. "That's all." Talia turned back to the sink, her hands moving automatically, washing dishes that didn't need washing. Understanding, finally, the full weight of what she'd walked into. This wasn't just a job. This was a house where hope had died. Where a father was watching his daughter fade and couldn't stop it. Where money and power meant nothing against the simple, terrible fact of a child's broken heart. Upstairs, Elena sat in silence. The kind of silence where you're breathing but not living. And downstairs, Talia whispered a prayer she wasn't sure anyone would hear. I don't know how to do this, Lord. But if you brought me here, don't let me waste it. That afternoon, the light through the windows turned soft and golden. Talia was drying dishes when Margaret came in with the dinner tray. A small bowl of chicken soup, crackers arranged in a circle, apple slices cut into stars. She watched Margaret arrange everything with the same careful precision, like preparing an offering no one would accept. Mrs. Hayes, Talia said quietly, can I take it up this time? Margaret stopped, her hands hovering over the tray. That's not necessary. I know. Talia's voice was steady. But I'd like to try. Margaret studied her face. There was something in Talia's eyes. Not arrogance. Not pity. Just calm. Finally, she nodded slowly. If Mr. Kingston finds out and gets upset, I can't protect you. I understand. Talia lifted the tray with both hands. The stairs felt longer than they should have. Each step carried weight, not from the tray, but from what waited at the top. The second-floor hallway was lined with photographs. Elena as a baby, chubby-cheeked and smiling. Elena laughing on a swing, her mother pushing from behind. Elena in Victoria's arms, both of them looking at the camera like nothing bad could ever happen. Talia's chest ached. She stopped outside Elena's door. It was cracked open just an inch. She knocked softly. Elena? My name's Talia. I brought your dinner. Silence. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was pale pink with white furniture, a child's dream room. Toys lined the shelves, untouched. Stuffed animals sat arranged on a window seat, gathering dust. A dollhouse stood in the corner, perfectly furnished, perfectly still. And on the floor, sitting with her back against the bed, was the smallest, most fragile child Talia had ever seen. Elena's hair hung loose around her face. Her arms looked like twigs. Her nightgown, covered in tiny purple flowers, hung off her shoulders. But it was her eyes that made Talia's breath catch. Hollow, empty, staring at nothing. Talia set the tray down on the dresser. Not in front of Elena. Not close to her. Just nearby. Then she pulled a chair over, not too close, 5 or 6 feet away, and sat down. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Just sat there, quiet, breathing the same air. Minutes passed. The light from the window shifted. Outside, the city moved on. Inside this room, time stood still. Finally, Talia spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You know, Elena, you don't have to eat if you don't want to. Elena's eyelashes flickered. Just barely. Talia kept her voice soft. My mama died when I was 6. And after she was gone, food didn't taste right anymore. Like everything in my mouth felt wrong. Like it didn't belong there. Silence. But Elena's head turned. Just a fraction of an inch. Nothing made sense after she died, Talia continued. I kept thinking, why should I eat when she can't? Why should I do anything when she's not here to see it? More silence. Then, so quiet Talia almost missed it. Your mama died? Talia's eyes filled. Yes, baby. She did. Elena turned her head a little more. Looked at her. Really looked at her. Mine too. I know. Mrs. Hayes told me. I'm so sorry. Elena stared at her like she was trying to see if Talia was telling the truth. Her voice came out small and broken. Did it hurt? Talia didn't lie. Every single day. Does it still hurt? Sometimes. But not the same way. Talia leaned forward just slightly. It gets softer. Like it's still there, but it doesn't cut as deep. Elena's lip trembled. For the first time in 2 weeks, something in her eyes changed. Not happiness. Not relief. Just recognition. Like she'd finally found someone who understood. I miss her, Elena whispered. I know you do, baby. I miss her so much it makes my tummy hurt. That's what grief feels like. It hurts everywhere. Elena pulled her knees tighter to her chest. Does it ever stop? The missing? But the hurting gets easier to carry. Like it becomes part of you instead of all of you. They sat in silence for another moment. Elena's fingers picked at the carpet. Her eyes stayed on Talia's face, searching. Miss Talia? Yes, baby. Will you stay? Talia's voice broke. As long as you want me to. Elena nodded once. Then she looked back down at her hands. But something had shifted. The air in the room felt different. Less heavy. Like a door that had been locked for months had opened just a crack. Talia stood slowly. I'm going to leave your dinner here. You don't have to eat it. But it's here if you want it. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Can I come back tomorrow? Elena's voice was so soft it almost disappeared. Okay. Outside in the hallway, Margaret stood with both hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She'd heard everything. The first words Elena had spoken in weeks. The first real conversation since Victoria died. Downstairs, Nathaniel sat at his desk in the study, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. He had no idea that 2 floors above him, his daughter had just spoken. Had just connected with someone. Had just taken the tiniest step back toward the living. He had no idea that everything was about to change. But upstairs, in that pale pink room, Elena sat with her back against the bed. And for the first time in months, she wasn't completely alone in her grief. Someone understood. Someone stayed. And somehow, that made the darkness just a little less dark. Talia couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Elena. Those hollow eyes. The whispered, mine too, like a secret she'd been carrying alone for 8 months. The way her small voice had asked, will you stay? Around 3 a.m., Talia gave up trying. She got dressed in the dark and caught the earliest bus she could, watching the empty streets roll past through foggy windows. By the time she reached the Kingston mansion, the sky was still dark, stars fading against the approaching dawn. She let herself in through the service entrance. The kitchen was silent, the marble counters gleaming in the dim light. She stood there for a moment, thinking about all those untouched meals. All that expensive, organic, nutritionist-approved food prepared by people who knew nutrition but didn't know Elena. Talia opened the refrigerator and moved past the organic vegetables, the imported cheeses, the carefully labeled containers. She reached for the simple things. Eggs. Butter. Then she found what she was looking for in the pantry. Flour, sugar, and a bag of chocolate chips. She was measuring flour when she heard footsteps behind her. Margaret stood in the doorway, surprised. You're here early. Couldn't sleep, Talia said, cracking eggs into a bowl. Margaret moved closer, looking at the ingredients spread across the counter. What are you doing? Making breakfast. Talia whisked the eggs gently. Those aren't the ingredients I gave you yesterday. Margaret's voice carried a note of concern. Mr. Kingston has very specific requirements. The nutritionist said. I know what the nutritionist said. Talia added milk to the bowl, her movements calm and deliberate. But Elena's not eating what they prescribed. When my grandmother was trying to help me after my mama died, she didn't make fancy meals. She made chocolate chip pancakes. Just flour, eggs, milk, and chocolate chips. Nothing special. Margaret's face softened. Her eyes glistened. I used to make those for Elena. Before. Her voice cracked. Before everything fell apart. Then maybe that's what she needs, Talia said quietly. Not something perfect. Just something that feels like home. She turned on the stove. The butter started to sizzle in the pan. She poured the batter, watching it spread and bubble. The smell filled the kitchen, warm, simple, honest. The smell of Sunday mornings and love and memories. Margaret wiped her eyes. Mr. Kingston won't like this. There's a meal plan. The nutritionist was very specific about. I know. Talia flipped the first pancake, watching it turn golden brown. But she's not eating what they planned. So what do we have to lose? Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, dressed in running clothes, his hair damp with sweat. He stopped when he saw the pancakes in the pan. What is that? His voice was tight, controlled. Breakfast, Talia said calmly, not looking away from the stove. That's not on her meal plan. He moved closer, jaw clenched. The doctors said she needs specific nutrients. Protein. Healthy fats. Not. He gestured at the pan. Not dessert for breakfast. Talia turned to face him. With respect, sir, the doctors said she's physically fine. But she's not eating what they prescribed. She's not eating anything. She held his gaze steadily. So what are we losing by trying something different? Nathaniel stared at her. Part of him wanted to tell her to stop, to follow the rules, to do what the experts said. But another part, the desperate father who'd watched his daughter fade for 2 weeks, wanted to believe anything might work. If this doesn't work, he said quietly, his voice strained, you're done here. Talia met his eyes without flinching. And if it does? He didn't answer, just turned and walked out, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Margaret let out a shaky breath. You're either very brave or very foolish. Talia cut the pancakes into small triangles, placed them on a plain white plate. No garnish. No presentation. Just food. Real food. The kind that tasted like love and Sunday mornings and mothers who weren't here anymore but somehow still were. Maybe both, Talia said softly. She lifted the plate with both hands. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs, not from fear of losing her job, but from hope. From the possibility that this might mean something. Please, God, she whispered, let this mean something. At Elena's door, she knocked softly. No answer. She pushed it open. Elena was in the same spot as yesterday, floor by the bed, knees pulled up, staring at nothing. Talia sat down in the same chair, set the plate on the floor between them, and then she did something no one expected. She picked up a triangle and took a bite herself. Elena's eyes moved just slightly toward the food. Talia chewed slowly, like she had all the time in the world. Like there was nowhere else she needed to be. She swallowed, then spoke softly. My mama used to make these on Sunday mornings. We'd sit at our tiny kitchen table, and she'd tell me stories while we ate. Talia took another bite. She used to say chocolate chip pancakes taste better when you share them with someone you love. Elena watched her. Her eyes followed every movement. She'd make funny shapes sometimes. Mickey Mouse. Hearts. Once she tried to make a butterfly, but it looked more like a blob. Talia smiled at the memory. We laughed so hard that morning. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. Mommy made these too. Talia's chest tightened. Did she? Elena nodded, her eyes filling with tears. On my birthday. She put extra chocolate chips in mine. Then she had wonderful taste. Silence. Elena stared at the plate. Her small hand lifted, trembling, then dropped back into her lap. Talia didn't push. Didn't say, just try it, or, it's good for you. or any of the things adults say when they're trying to fix something. She just sat there, present. Finally, Elena spoke again. Her voice shook. Miss Talia? Yes, baby? If I eat it, will I forget her? Talia's throat closed. She leaned forward just a little. No, baby. Eating it means you remember her. Every bite is a memory of your birthday, of your mama making something special just for you, of how much she loved you. Elena's eyes searched Talia's face. Promise. I promise. Elena's tiny fingers reached out again. This time, they didn't stop. They were so small they could barely hold the triangle. She brought it close to her face, smelled it. Tears rolled down her cheeks. And outside the door, Margaret stood with her hand over her mouth, hardly daring to breathe. Elena opened her mouth and took the tiniest bite. She chewed slowly, eyes squeezed shut, tears falling faster now. She swallowed, and then something inside her shattered. She started sobbing, deep, broken sobs that sounded like they'd been trapped inside her for months. Her whole body shook with the force of it. Talia moved closer and pulled her into her arms. Elena collapsed against her, still holding the pancake in one hand, clutching Talia's shirt with the other. The sobs tore through her small frame, raw and desperate. I miss her, Elena cried. I miss Mommy so much. I know, baby. I know you do. It hurts. It hurts so bad. I know it does. Talia rocked her gently, one hand on Elena's back, holding her together while she fell apart. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to cry. She's not coming back. Elena's voice broke on every word. Grandma said she's in heaven and she's never coming back, and I want her back. I want my mommy. I know, sweet girl. I know. Elena cried and cried, her whole body trembling. Tears soaked through Talia's shirt. The pancake was still clutched in her small fist, forgotten but held tight like a lifeline. And through it all, Talia just held her. Didn't tell her to stop. Didn't tell her it would be okay. Just held her while she finally let it out. In the doorway, Nathaniel stood frozen. His hand was over his mouth. Tears poured down his face. He'd just watched his daughter eat for the first time in 2 weeks. But more than that, he'd just watched her cry for the first time since the funeral. He'd thought the silence was the worst thing. The empty stares. The stillness. But now he understood. The silence was her drowning. This crying, this breaking, this was her coming up for air. He took a step into the room, then another. His legs felt weak. Elena saw him through her tears. Daddy! The word broke him. He crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside them, his voice cracking. I'm here, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Elena reached for him with her free hand, still holding the pancake in the other. He took her hand and kissed it over and over, his tears mixing with hers. I'm sorry, he choked out. Baby, I'm so sorry. I'm eating, Daddy. Elena's voice was small and broken. Like Mommy wanted. She always wanted me to eat my breakfast. Nathaniel couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. Elena looked at the pancake in her hand, then at Talia, then back at her father. And she took another bite. Chewed. Swallowed. Tears still falling but eating. Then another bite. Each one a choice. Each one a small act of survival. Each one saying, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. Talia stayed close, one arm around Elena's shoulders, letting the little girl lean against her. Nathaniel knelt beside them, holding his daughter's hand like he was afraid to let go. Like if he released her, she might slip away again. In the hallway, Margaret stood with both hands pressed over her heart, tears streaming down her face. She watched the impossible happen. The child who'd been disappearing was coming back. Not all at once. Not completely. But bite by bite, breath by breath, she was coming back. Elena finished one triangle, then started on a second. Her movements were slow, exhausted, but deliberate. She looked at her father between bites, making sure he was still there. Making sure he was really seeing her. "I see you, sweetheart," Nathaniel whispered, reading her mind. "I see you." When Elena finished the second triangle, she set the plate down carefully. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was blotchy from crying. But there was something different in her expression now. Something that hadn't been there before. She looked exhausted, more exhausted than a 3-year-old should ever look. But alive. "I'm tired," she whispered. "Let's get you into bed," Talia said softly. Nathaniel lifted Elena carefully, like she might break. She weighed almost nothing in his arms. He carried her to the bed and laid her down gently, pulling the covers up to her chin. Elena's eyes were already half closed. "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice fading. "Every second," Nathaniel promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Elena turned her head slightly toward Talia. "You too." Talia moved to the other side of the bed, sitting in the chair she'd occupied yesterday. "I'm right here, baby." Elena's breathing began to slow, evening out. Her hand crept out from under the covers, reaching for her father. Nathaniel took it immediately, holding it between both of his. "Love you, Daddy," Elena mumbled, half asleep. Nathaniel's voice broke. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world." Within minutes, Elena was asleep. The first real sleep she'd had in days, her body finally relaxing, finally resting. But even in that moment of breakthrough, even as relief flooded through everyone in the room, something hung in the air. Unspoken. Unfinished. Elena had started eating. But no one yet understood why she'd stopped. Nathaniel sat in the chair by the bed, still holding Elena's hand. Talia remained on the other side, watching the little girl's chest rise and fall. The room was quiet except for Elena's soft breathing. Margaret appeared in the doorway with a cup of tea for Talia, then retreated silently. An hour passed. Then another. Elena slept on, exhausted from crying and eating and feeling everything she'd kept locked away for so long. Nathaniel looked across the bed at Talia. His eyes were red, his face haggard, but there was something else there now. Gratitude. Wonder. Questions. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Talia nodded but said nothing. Because she knew, they both knew, that this was just the beginning. Elena had eaten. She had cried. She had spoken. But the why of it all, the reason she'd stopped eating in the first place, still waited in the shadows. And soon, very soon, that truth would come out. Nathaniel turned back to his daughter, watching her sleep, terrified to look away. She looked so small in that bed. Too small to have carried such weight. Too small to have made such a devastating choice. The afternoon light faded to evening. Margaret brought more tea, then dinner neither of them touched. And still they sat vigil, watching Elena breathe, watching her rest, both of them grateful and terrified in equal measure. Because they'd almost lost her. And they still didn't know why. The room was quiet except for Elena's breathing. Nathaniel still held her hand. Talia sat in the chair on the other side of the bed, watching the rise and fall of the little girl's chest. The evening light cast long shadows across the pale pink walls. Then, so soft it almost disappeared into the silence, Elena spoke. "Miss Talia?" "Yes, baby." Elena's eyes opened slowly. She looked at Talia, then at her father. "Why did everyone try to make me better when I didn't want to be better?" The air went still. Nathaniel's head snapped up. Talia's heart stopped. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Talia asked gently. Elena's voice was small. Honest. The way only a child can be. "I wanted to go to Mommy." The words hung in the air like broken glass. "Grandma said Mommy went to heaven." Elena's eyes filled with tears again. So I thought if I stopped eating, I could go there too. I could see her again. Nathaniel made a strangled sound, half sob, half gasp. He pressed his hand to his mouth. Talia couldn't breathe. Elena, Nathaniel's voice broke completely. Baby, what are you saying? Elena looked at him with those wide, innocent eyes. I tried really hard, Daddy, but it hurt. My tummy hurt and my head hurt and I got so tired. Her lip trembled. But I kept thinking if I just waited a little longer, I'd see Mommy again. Nathaniel crossed the room and dropped to his knees beside the bed, his whole body shaking. Baby, why didn't you tell me? Elena's voice got even smaller. You were always sad, Daddy. Always working. And when you came home, you looked at me like I made you sadder. The words cut deeper than any knife. No, Nathaniel choked out. No, sweetheart. That's not. After Mommy died, you stopped reading to me. Elena's voice cracked. You stopped tucking me in. You were here, but you weren't here. A tear rolled down her cheek. I thought maybe you didn't want me anymore. Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, his whole body convulsing with sobs. Gano. Baby, no. I wanted you. I want you. I was just so scared. Of what? Elena whispered against his shoulder. Of losing you the way I lost her. His voice broke completely. So I worked. I stayed busy. I told myself if I could just provide everything you needed, the best doctors, the best care, I could keep you safe. He pulled back to look at her face, his hands trembling as they cupped her cheeks. But I didn't realize. He couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words. Elena touched his wet cheek with her small hand. You left me alone, Daddy. I know. Nathaniel sobbed into her hair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Talia sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. This was why Elena stopped eating. Not depression. Not illness. A 3-year-old trying to solve her grief the only way that made sense to her. If Mommy's gone, I'll go too. Elena pulled back from her father, looking at him with those heartbreaking eyes. Are you going to leave again? Nathaniel gripped her hands like a lifeline. Never. I swear to you, sweetheart. Never again. Promise. I promise. Every single day, I'll be here. Really here. Not just in the house. Here with you. Elena turned to Talia, her voice shaking. Miss Talia, do you think Mommy wants me in heaven with her? Talia's throat closed. She moved closer, kneeling beside the bed. No, baby. I think your mama is watching you from heaven right now. And you know what she wants. What? She wants you to stay here. To grow up. To laugh and play and eat chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. Talia's voice shook but stayed steady. She wants you to live the biggest, most beautiful life you can. Because that's what mamas want for their babies. Elena's eyes filled again. But I miss her. I know. And you'll always miss her. That's okay. Talia leaned closer. But missing her and living your life, those two things can happen at the same time. You can miss her every single day and still be here. Still grow up. Still be happy sometimes. Will she be sad if I'm happy without her? No, baby. Talia's voice broke. She'll be happy that you're happy. That's how love works. Even from heaven. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing. Her small hand found her father's again. Daddy, will you stay with me tonight? Nathaniel's voice was thick with tears. Every night, sweetheart. Starting now. And read me stories? Every single one you want. And tuck me in? Every night for the rest of your life. Elena nodded slowly, then yawned. The emotional exhaustion was catching up with her again. Okay, Daddy. Nathaniel pulled the covers up around her, his hands still shaking. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her forehead again. Like he was trying to make up for every time he hadn't been there. I love you, Elena. More than anything in this entire world. I love you too, Daddy. As Elena's eyes drifted closed, Nathaniel stayed on his knees beside the bed, one hand holding hers, the other pressed to his mouth. Talia stood quietly, giving them space but not leaving. One truth burned in the room, unspoken but understood by both adults. They'd almost lost her. Not to illness. Not to anything they could fight with money or medicine or expertise. They'd almost lost her to grief. To loneliness. To a 3-year-old's desperate attempt to stop the pain the only way she knew how. If Talia hadn't arrived when she did, if she hadn't understood, if Elena hadn't spoken. Nathaniel looked up at Talia, his face ravaged with tears. The question was written all over his expression. How close did we come? Talia's answering look said what they both knew. Too close. Far too close. Elena's breathing evened out as she drifted toward sleep. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her father knelt beside her bed, holding her hand. And on the other side, Talia remained in the chair, keeping watch. In the hallway, Margaret leaned against the wall, her hand over her heart, tears streaming silently. The house that had been filled with the silence of grief now held something different. Not healing, not yet. But the beginning of it. The first fragile steps back from the edge. And the understanding that love, real love, meant showing up. Being present. Sitting in the pain together instead of running from it alone. Elena slept. Nathaniel kept vigil. And Talia whispered a prayer of gratitude that she'd arrived in time. That God had sent her to this house, to this family, at exactly the right moment. Before it was too late. Nathaniel didn't leave Elena's room that night. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching her sleep, terrified that if he looked away, she might disappear. Her breathing was soft and steady. Her hand rested on the blanket, fingers slightly curled. She looked so small. Too small to have carried the weight she'd been carrying. Too small to have made the choice she'd made. I thought if I stopped eating, I could go there too. The words echoed in his mind, over and over. His 3-year-old daughter had tried to die. Had actively tried to stop living. And he hadn't known. Hadn't seen it. Had been too busy drowning in his own grief to notice hers. He pressed his palms against his eyes, but the tears came anyway. Around 3 a.m., soft footsteps approached. Talia appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. She didn't say anything. Just set one on the nightstand beside him and moved to sit in the other chair. For a long time, neither spoke. Just sat there in the dim light from the hallway, watching Elena breathe. Finally, Nathaniel broke the silence. His voice was hoarse. How did you know? Know what? What she needed. What we all needed. He looked at Talia across the bed. The doctors couldn't figure it out. The specialists. People who'd spent their entire careers helping children. But you. He shook his head. You walked in and within 2 days you reached her. Talia was quiet for a moment. I didn't know, she said softly. I just remembered what it felt like to be that alone. Nathaniel's voice cracked. I let her be alone. You were drowning too. That's not an excuse. He pressed his palms against his eyes again. She thought I didn't want her anymore. My own daughter thought I'd given up on her. His hands dropped, his face ravaged. What kind of father does that make me? A grieving one, Talia said gently. A human one. She was trying to die. The words came out strangled. She was 3 years old and she was trying to die, and I didn't even see it. You didn't give up on her. You just didn't know how to reach her. I should have known. His voice broke. I'm her father. I should have known. Talia leaned forward slightly. You were grieving too. You lost your wife. You were trying to survive. By abandoning my daughter. The guilt in his voice was suffocating. By protecting myself while she suffered alone. My grandma used to say something, Talia said quietly. She'd say, grief makes us do strange things. We push away the people we love most because loving them hurts too much. Nathaniel stared at Elena's sleeping face. When Victoria died, I told myself I had to be strong. Had to keep everything together. I couldn't fall apart because Elena needed me. He paused, his jaw clenching. But I was falling apart. Every single day. I just did it where she couldn't see. So she thought you'd moved on. And she thought she had to do the same. His voice dropped to a whisper. Or follow her mother. The weight of those words hung in the air. I almost lost her, Nathaniel said. If you hadn't come when you did. But I did. Why? He looked at her directly. Why did you care? She wasn't your responsibility. You could have just done your job and stayed out of it. Talia's eyes glistened. Because I remembered. I remembered being that little girl who didn't want to live anymore. And I remembered my grandmother sitting with me every single day, not trying to fix me, just being there. Just showing me I wasn't alone. She wiped her eyes. If I could be that for Elena, how could I not try? Nathaniel's throat closed. You saved her. No. Talia shook her head firmly. I'm not the one who saved her. You are. He looked at her, confused. She didn't need me to feed her, Talia explained. She needed her father to come back. To really be there. To see her. Her voice softened. And tonight you did. You heard her. You listened. You promised to stay. That's what saved her. Nathaniel looked back at Elena. His daughter. His reason for breathing. The little girl he'd almost lost because he'd been too afraid of his own pain to see hers. I won't leave her again, he whispered. Never again. I know. They sat in silence as the night slowly faded toward dawn. The city outside began to wake, distant sounds of traffic, the first bird singing, the sky gradually lightening from black to deep blue to pale gray. Nathaniel watched his daughter sleep, finally understanding what she'd needed all along. Not specialists. Not meal plans. Not expensive treatments. Just him. Present. Really there. Willing to sit in the grief with her instead of hiding from it. Elena stirred slightly, her fingers curling tighter around the blanket. Nathaniel reached out and gently touched her hand. She settled immediately, her breathing evening out again. I'm here, he whispered. I'm right here, sweetheart. As dawn broke fully, the room filled with soft morning light. Margaret appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene, Nathaniel and Talia keeping vigil on either side of Elena's bed, coffee cups forgotten, both of them watching the little girl breathe. Margaret's hand went to her heart. She didn't say anything. Just stood there for a moment, tears in her eyes, witnessing the beginning of something. Not healing, not yet. That would take time. But the start of it. The fragile, tentative first steps back from the edge. A father learning to be present. A daughter learning she wasn't alone. A family learning to grieve together instead of separately. Margaret quietly pulled the door closed, giving them privacy. Giving them space for this new beginning. Inside the room, Elena slept peacefully. And on either side of her bed, two people kept watch. Nathaniel, finally understanding that love meant showing up even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. And Talia, the stranger who'd walked into their lives at exactly the right moment. Who'd seen what everyone else had missed. Who'd remembered what it felt like to be a grieving child and had refused to let another one suffer alone. The long night was ending. And with the morning light came something they hadn't felt in months. Fragile. Uncertain. But real. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks brought small miracles. Elena ate every meal. Small portions at first, half a pancake, a few spoonfuls of soup, some crackers. But she ate. And slowly, gradually, she began to eat more. The hollow look in her cheeks started to fade. Color returned to her skin. The light came back to her eyes, flickering at first, then growing steadier. She started talking again. Not just whispers, but real conversation. Questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds sleep? Can we have strawberries with breakfast? She told stories about her dreams. About a cartoon she remembered watching with her mother. About wanting to learn to ride a bike someday. Every word felt like a gift. Nathaniel transformed too. He canceled meetings. Delegated projects. Told his assistant to hold all non-urgent calls after 5 p.m. For the first time in 8 months, he left his study before dinner. He came home, really home, every evening. He sat with Elena while she ate, asking about her day, listening to her stories about the butterflies she saw from her window or the pictures she drew with Margaret. Every night he read to her. They started with Good Night Moon, Elena's favorite when she was younger. Then moved on to longer stories. Fairy tales. Adventures. Books about brave little girls who could do anything. He tucked her in carefully, making sure her stuffed bunny was positioned just right. And he stayed, sitting in the chair beside her bed until her breathing evened out and she was truly asleep. Some nights he stayed even longer, just watching her, grateful for every breath. On Sundays, they established a new tradition. Chocolate chip pancakes. Elena would drag her step stool to the counter, her small hands already reaching for the mixing bowl. Talia would guide her through the steps, cracking eggs. Gently, baby, or we'll have shells. Measuring flour. 1 cup, that's right. Stirring the batter in careful circles. Nathaniel manned the stove, flipping pancakes while Elena called out instructions. That one needs more chocolate chips, Daddy. Make it bigger. Can you make a heart shape? They'd eat at the kitchen table, not the formal dining room that felt cold and empty. Just the 3 of them crowded around the small breakfast table, syrup dripping, laughter filling the space that had been silent for so long. One Sunday morning, about a month after everything changed, Elena looked up from her plate. A chocolate chip was smudged on her cheek. Miss Talia? Yes, baby? Elena's voice got quiet, thoughtful. Do you think my mommy and your mama are friends in heaven? Talia's chest tightened. She glanced at Nathaniel, who'd stopped mid-bite. You know what? I think they're best friends. Elena's face lit up. Really? Really? I think they're up there right now, watching us eat pancakes and smiling. Good. Elena nodded seriously. Then they're not lonely. And they can talk about us. Nathaniel's eyes filled, but he was smiling. I think you're absolutely right, sweetheart. After breakfast, they bundled up. It was early October now, the air crisp with autumn. They walked the few blocks to Central Park, Elena between them, holding both their hands. The moment they reached the playground, Elena broke free and ran toward the swings, her laughter echoing across the open space. Push me, Daddy. Push me high. Nathaniel jogged after her, and soon Elena was soaring, her delighted squeals filling the air. Higher. I'm flying. Talia stood back, watching. Nathaniel's face was transformed, no longer haggard with grief and exhaustion, but alive. Present. His daughter's laughter had brought him back to life too. After a while, Nathaniel walked back to where Talia stood. Elena had moved on to the slide, calling out, "Watch me," before each trip down. I don't know how to thank you, Nathaniel said quietly, his eyes still on Elena. You don't need to. You gave me my daughter back. He turned to look at Talia. You gave me my life back. Talia shook her head gently. She was never gone. She was just waiting for you to come home. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Elena play. Other children had joined her now, and the sound of their laughter mixed together like music. I was so lost, Nathaniel admitted. After Victoria died, I didn't know how to be both father and mother. Didn't know how to be strong enough for both of us. So I just shut down. You were grieving. So was she. But she was 3 years old and alone in it. He paused. If you hadn't come? But I did. Something passed between them, understanding, gratitude, and something deeper. Something neither was quite ready to name but both could feel. She loves you, Nathaniel said softly. She talks about you constantly. Miss Talia said this. Miss Talia showed me that. He smiled. You've become essential to her. She's become essential to me too. They watched Elena climb the ladder to the slide again, her movements confident now, so different from the fragile child of a month ago. Come on. Elena called out, waving at them. Come play. They spent another hour at the playground. Nathaniel pushed Elena on the swings while Talia helped her across the monkey bars. They chased her around the jungle gym, Elena's giggles infectious. By the time they headed home, all three were breathless and happy, Elena chattering nonstop about everything they'd done. That night, after dinner and bath time, after Nathaniel had read 3 stories and Elena had finally fallen asleep, he found Talia in the kitchen. She was wiping down the counters, humming softly to herself, something she did when she thought no one was listening. Talia! She turned, surprised. Is everything okay? Does Elena need? No, she's sleeping. He moved closer. I needed to say something. She waited, setting down the dish towel. You're not just Elena's caregiver anymore. His voice was serious, steady. You know that, right? Talia's eyes filled. She nodded slowly. I know. Your family. The words came out thick with emotion. These past weeks, watching you with her, seeing how she lights up when you walk in the room, you're not the hired help. You're not an employee. You're family. Thank you, Talia whispered. That means everything. They stood in the kitchen, the silence comfortable, filled with understanding. Later, they walked upstairs together, stopping at Elena's doorway. The little girl was curled on her side, her stuffed bunny clutched close, breathing deeply. The nightlight cast a soft glow across her peaceful face. Look at her, Nathaniel whispered. A month ago, I thought we were going to lose her. But we didn't. No, we didn't. He looked at Talia. You know what the miracle is? It's not just that she's eating again. It's that she wants to be here. She chose to stay. Talia's voice was soft. She chose you. She chose this life. Even with the grief, even with missing her mother, she chose to keep living. The penthouse that had felt like a tomb, silent, cold, suffocating with unexpressed grief, now felt like a home. Laughter echoed in the hallways. Elena's drawings covered the refrigerator. The kitchen smelled like pancakes on Sunday mornings. Something beautiful was growing from the broken pieces. Not the family they'd been before Victoria died, that could never be recreated. But something new. Something built on honesty and presence and the willingness to sit in grief together instead of suffering alone. Nathaniel pulled Elena's door almost closed, leaving it cracked open the way she liked. As they walked down the hallway together, he glanced at Talia. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for letting me in. And in that moment, both of them understood what was happening. The foundation was being laid for something neither had expected. Something that would change all their lives. But that was still to come. For now, they had this. A little girl sleeping peacefully, a father learning to be present, and a home slowly filling with light again. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 months had passed since that first pancake breakfast. The leaves in Central Park had turned gold and red, then fallen, and now early winter was settling over the city. One evening, after Elena had fallen asleep, Nathaniel found Talia in the kitchen. She was putting away the last of the dinner dishes, humming that soft melody he'd come to recognize as hers. "Talia!" She turned, a dish towel in her hands. "Is everything okay?" "Yes. He moved closer, his heart pounding. "These past weeks, watching you with Elena, seeing how you've changed everything, changed us, I've realized something." She waited, her eyes searching his face. "I'm falling in love with you." The words came out quiet but certain. "Maybe I have been for a while now. I just didn't know if I had the right to feel it. If it was too soon. How could I not?" Talia interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. "You let yourself break so you could heal. You showed up for her. You became the father she needed." Her voice shook. "That's who I fell in love with. The man who chose to come home." Nathaniel crossed the space between them in 2 steps. He cupped her face in his hands, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. She leaned in. Their kiss was gentle, careful, full of everything they'd been too afraid to say. Full of gratitude and hope and the fragile beginning of something beautiful. When they pulled apart, both were crying and smiling at the same time. "I don't want to rush this," Nathaniel whispered. "Elena's been through so much." "We'll go slow," Talia agreed. "We'll follow her lead." But the next morning, when Elena came into the kitchen and found them making breakfast together, holding hands while Nathaniel flipped pancakes, she climbed onto her step stool and watched them with those wise, knowing eyes. "Are you going to get married?" she asked, matter of fact, like she was asking about the weather. They both froze, then laughed. "Maybe someday," Nathaniel said carefully, kneeling down to her eye level. "Would that be okay with you?" Elena thought about it seriously, her little face scrunched in concentration. "Only if we still have Sunday pancakes." Talia grinned through her tears. "Forever and always." "Then yes." Elena hopped down and hugged them both. "I think Mommy would like Miss Talia." Nathaniel pulled them both close, his voice thick. "I think she would too, sweetheart." 6 months later, in early September, they threw Elena's 4th birthday party. Nothing extravagant, just a few friends from her new preschool, Margaret, and the 3 of them. The apartment filled with laughter and the chaos of children playing. Elena blew out her candles while everyone sang, her face lit up with pure joy. She made a wish, whatever it was remained secret, and the room erupted in applause. When the last guest left and the apartment grew quiet again, Elena climbed into Talia's lap, clutching a folded piece of paper. "I made you something," she said shyly. Talia unfolded it carefully. Her breath caught. It was a drawing. 4 figures holding hands, a tall man, a little girl, a woman with dark skin. And in the corner, surrounded by clouds and stars, a 5th figure. Smaller, watching over them. At the top, in Elena's careful letters, "My family." Below the figures, she'd written, "Mommy is in heaven, but she's still with us." Nathaniel looked over Talia's shoulder and had to sit down. His hand went to his mouth. "She's still part of us, right?" Elena asked quietly. "Even though she's not here?" "Always," Talia whispered. "Always and forever." Elena smiled, satisfied, and snuggled closer. That night, after Elena was asleep, Nathaniel led Talia out to the balcony. The city stretched below them, a million lights against the dark. The air was cool, autumn settling in again. "I've been thinking about something," he said, taking her hands. "What's that?" "About how you walked into our lives when we were drowning. How you didn't just save Elena, you saved me too." He reached into his pocket. "I don't want to do life without you, Talia. Not any of it." Not the hard parts or the beautiful parts or the ordinary parts. He pulled out a small box and opened it. A simple ring, elegant and perfect, caught the light. "Will you marry me?" Talia's hands flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, of course yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her close, both of them crying, both of them laughing, both of them grateful for the journey that had brought them here. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, they got married. It was a small ceremony in the apartment, just close friends and family. Elena was the flower girl, wearing a white dress she'd helped pick out, carrying a basket of roses, grinning so wide her face might split. When Nathaniel and Talia stood before the officiant to say their vows, Elena stood between them, holding both their hands. Nathaniel had to stop twice because he was crying. Talia's voice shook but stayed strong. "I promise to show up," Nathaniel said. "Every day. Really show up." "I promise to stay," Talia said. "Through all of it." And Elena, without being prompted, added her own vow. "I promise to eat my pancakes every Sunday." Everyone laughed through their tears. When it was over, when they were officially a family in every sense of the word, Elena threw her arms around both of them. "Now we're forever," she announced. "Forever," they agreed. That evening, after the last guest had left and the apartment grew quiet, the three of them collapsed on the couch. Elena was half asleep, refusing to go to bed, wedged between Nathaniel and Talia. "Tell me the story again," she mumbled. "Which story, baby?" Talia asked, stroking her hair. "How you came here. How you saved me." Nathaniel shifted so he could see her face. "You want to hear how Miss Talia arrived?" So he told it. About the morning Talia walked through their door. About how she sat with Elena when no one else could reach her. About the chocolate chip pancakes that changed everything. About how she taught them all what it meant to really be present with someone you love. Elena listened with her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. When he finished, she opened her eyes just a little. "I'm glad I stayed," she whispered. Nathaniel's throat closed. "Me too, baby. Me too. I think this is what Mommy wanted." Elena's voice was fading. "For us to be happy again. Together." "I think you're absolutely right," Talia said softly. Elena yawned, her eyes drifting closed again. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" "Anything you want," Nathaniel promised. "And every Sunday?" "Always," Talia said. "Forever and always." "Good." Elena snuggled deeper between them. Within minutes, she was asleep. Nathaniel and Talia sat there, neither wanting to move, watching her breathe. Looking at the life they'd built from broken pieces. The family they'd become, not the one any of them had expected, but the one that had been growing all along. The apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the suffocating silence of grief, but the peaceful quiet of home, of safety and love. "We did it," Talia whispered. "We did," Nathaniel agreed, his arm around both of them. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. A father who'd learned to come home. A daughter who'd chosen to stay. And a woman who'd remembered what it meant to show up for someone who needed her. Peace, warmth, laughter, and love. These are proof that the darkest moments can lead to the most beautiful beginnings. That healing doesn't come from money or power or expertise, but from showing up. From sitting in the pain with someone instead of running from it. From choosing every single day to keep living, to keep loving, to keep trying. Sometimes God's greatest miracles don't look like miracles at all. They look like strangers who become family. Like pancakes on Sunday mornings. Like a little girl learning to live again. And like a father who finally came home. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you believe love and kindness still matter, show it. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Help us spread more stories that heal, inspire, and remind the whole world that miracles are still happening around us.